Hey, I'm Hannah Weiss, the Director of Education at the Science Museum of Western Virginia, and this is your Moment of STEM. And this week, we're going to talk about the tardigrades on the moon. So earlier this year, the Space IL privately owned corporation launched the Beresheet spacecraft to the moon. So they were an organization that was part of the Google Lunar X, or the Google X Lunar Landing Competition Prize that ended in 2018. But the goal there was basically to get a private company to land on the moon. And though it ended in 2018, this company launched in 2019, and it looked like they were actually going to succeed. Unfortunately, part of doing this as a privately owned company meant that they did it for something that was pretty inexpensive as far as projects of this magnitude go. It only cost them about $100 million, which, yes, I know sounds like an awful lot, but to get something to the moon takes a lot. Doing this project for only $100 million meant that it was a pretty small craft. It also meant that they didn't have any backup systems. And the result of that was that if something went wrong, like it did, there wasn't really any way to fix it. So unfortunately, something did go wrong with these backup systems, and the Beresheet lander crashed onto the moon, which in and of itself, though, is sad and means that they weren't the first privately owned corporation to put something on the moon, isn't all that surprising, right? We know space travel is really, really hard. Even government-funded and government-run things like the InSight landing can have minutes where you don't really have control, and especially if you're doing something on a tight budget where you're not having backup systems, the likelihood of things going wrong are pretty high. So it crashed, which isn't terrible. But then some more interesting information started coming out. You see, this Beresheet lander, on it, had this really, really awesome library of information. It had in analog form, so in written form, really, really, really tiny, that you'd be able to see with about 1,000 times magnification. Basically all of the English Wikipedia and a bunch of different languages and a lot more information on these discs that were plated with nickel. The idea was to basically put a library on the moon, which is really cool. But they went a little bit further. They put some DNA there and tardigrades. So tardigrades are micro animals. They're very, very tiny. They're called sometimes water bears or moss piglets. But they do something really, really cool. They can survive extreme conditions. They can survive in the vacuum of space. They can survive in our deepest oceans. They are all over the place. And they do this by entering this cryptobiotic state, this basically hibernation, which they can come out of even decades later. So they're a really great choice to send with this lunar library. But then it crashed, and it spilled these tardigrades onto the moon's surface, which started a whole bunch of questions about, can we do this? There's even an Office of Planetary Protection that's all about making sure that as we're exploring our solar system, as we're exploring other planets, we're not contaminating them with stuff from our planet, which is really, really important, especially if we're looking for signs of life, which we'll likely find as like microbes and things. So the fact that tardigrades were on the moon surprised a lot of people. But it's not really terrible. In really, really good conditions, these animals, they can come out of their kind of hibernation state. Those conditions don't really exist on the moon, so they're probably just going to stay in this cryptobiosis and this hibernation. Also, they're not the first DNA on the moon. The Apollo 11 landings, for example, or all of the Apollo programs, left a lot of DNA behind. And there may even have been tardigrades on the moon already from, collisions with Earth that sent rocks into space. So it's not the worst thing in the world that there are tardigrades on the moon, but it did start this really interesting, almost international conversation. And if you'd like to see any more about the conversation that was sparked, the tardigrades on the moon, or the Beresheet lander, you can check out any of the links below. Otherwise, I'm Hannah Weiss from the Science Museum of Western Virginia. And one of the really interesting things I also found out while researching this is that it's not the first library that was launched into space. There was another one of these compressed analogs, so compressed writing libraries, that was put in the glove compartment of Elon Musk's car that was launched. So that means there's a library in a glove compartment in space. How cool is that?